So last Sunday morning, I decided to walk to church. And as I did, I got to thinking about today and what the focus of this morning's message perhaps ought to be. As I was walking along Dane Street, I was really hoping, maybe even pleading for inspiration, because I have to admit that over the past few weeks, on more than one occasion, I have been rendered speechless. In the face of so many controversial and fast-paced international and world events, words have just escaped me. So as I continued to walk, I started to think about Jesus, and I wondered if there was a story or passage of Scripture which described Jesus as being so stunned or so moved that he was speechless. And I thought about it, I've looked it up, I can't seem to find a story like that. I have found some stories where Jesus had some pretty good one-liners, some pretty nice, sharp responses, like when he was before the Roman ruler Pontius Pilate, and he was about to be judged, and the Pilate said to Jesus, "Are you king of the Jews?" And Jesus sort of said, "Well, you say that I am." So Jesus had some pretty good one-liners, but speechless? I don't think so. So then I got thinking about the disciples. And for the first time ever, I had some real empathy and sympathy for those disciples, because I have to admit that I have been fairly harshly critical of them for their silence and disappearance after Jesus was arrested. In a little while, we're going to gather around this table, and we're going to remember the last conversation and the last meal that Jesus shared with his disciples before he was betrayed and then arrested. But as that night moved on, it seems like pretty much all of the disciples, except maybe Peter, they just went into hiding. They were silent. They just disappeared. And I've always been critical of them for that. How could they do that? Why were they such cowards? Why did they disappear? Why did they completely abandon Jesus? Why didn't anybody stand up for him? But then as I was on my walk last Sunday, I started to think, well, maybe they went into hiding out of fear for their own safety, but maybe there was something more at work as well. Maybe they were just bewildered and they didn't know what to say or what to do. In that evening, all that they had been working for, all that they had been hoping for, it started to disappear. It was going away. Their leader, their teacher, the rabbi, the Messiah, he'd just been arrested. He was about to be put to death. What they had worked for, hoped for, put their energies towards, it was all disappearing at such a fast pace. And so maybe those disciples just needed some time to adjust, to adapt, before they could figure out what they needed to say and what kind of actions they might need to take. And so for the first time last Sunday morning, I started to have some real empathy for them, because I have to admit too that over the past few years I've discovered I'm becoming more of an introvert, that I'm somebody that needs some time to sort through and process and organize my thoughts before I speak. And so over the past few weeks, I have found myself rendered speechless as I try to sort through all that's going on around me. But as I thought about this moment this morning, although some of you might have thought it's the greatest idea ever, I figured I shouldn't just stand up here for 15 minutes and not say a word. That I wouldn't really be living up to my responsibility as the morning's preacher. So when I got to church last Sunday, I decided to consult the lectionary. That's a published list of suggested scriptures for preachers to use each Sunday morning. So I looked up what the scriptures were, and they included those two sentences: "You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world." And I thought, really? Here I don't have a word to say, and I'm supposed to talk about being zesty flavor and shining our light brightly? What a juxtaposition. And yet the challenge was on. And so I started to wrestle with it, work with it, try to figure out what those passages might have to say to me and to us in this moment. And so in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is described as being on a hillside with his disciples, and he's been teaching them. He's been teaching them the Beatitudes, like, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. But then he turns to his disciples and he says to them, you are the salt of the earth. That was actually an amazing affirmation for him to offer to his disciples. Because although we might think of salt as primarily that companion to pepper on our tables, or as one child described it, salt is what makes mashed potatoes taste bad when it's not there. In Jesus' day, salt was actually a very valued commodity. It had as many as 11 uses. It was considered so valuable that Romans often paid their soldiers in salt. So if a soldier wasn't living up to his responsibility, it was said that he was not worth his salt. So salt was used as a preservative for food, especially for meats. So salt was actually vital to survival. Salt was a catalyst for fires in ovens. Salt was used to enhance the flavor of food. And salt was also used as an antiseptic, as something that helped to heal wounds. It was an agent of healing. It might have had a little sting with it, but salt was an agent of healing. It was even said that newborns would be rubbed with salt because those primitive medical birthing procedures often resulted in babies having some cuts and risking infection. And so those babies were rubbed with salt. Ouch, those poor babies being rubbed with salt. But salt was an agent of healing. And so in this time that we're in, when life and issues are moving so quickly, I hear God calling to you, to me, to us, to be salt of the earth, to be agents of healing, to heal the wounds, to heal the divisions that are around us, that are separating us one from another. In this time when there is pain and division and vitriol, I hear God calling to us, asking us to work for peace and justice, to be agents of healing this world that is so hurting around us. Now, in recent weeks, we've been using this screen more often, but today I decided to put some pictures towards the end of your order of worship, just in case you want to rip them out and put them on a bulletin board or your fridge or use as a bookmark. And the top picture, which is about you are the salt of the earth, was taken last weekend at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport in the midst of one of the peaceful demonstrations against the immigration ban. Pictured are two dads with their children on their shoulders. And what obviously caught the photographer's attention is that one family is Muslim and one family is Jewish. The rabbi explained that he had brought his son to the airport after his swimming lesson so that his son could see and experience for himself what it was like to stand up for what you believe in a peaceful way. The rabbi's in-laws, so the son's grandparents, were Holocaust survivors who had once been in a refugee resettlement camp. Now the other family, with Yildirim as the father, who's a store owner, manager in a suburb of Chicago, said that he and his wife and 4 children had come to the airport with cookies to give to the lawyers who were donating their time to those who were detained. And so after the fathers took their children off of their shoulders, the 2 children started to talk to each other. Adine and Miriam just started to talk. So then the fathers started to talk to each other. They exchanged cell phone numbers, and they set up a luncheon date together, or a dinner date for the whole family. And the Yildirim said to the photographer, I know that people expect Muslims and Jews to hate each other, but we're not fighting one another here. We're working together for peace. That's some mighty fine salt. And that's what I hear God calling to us, urging us to be salt of the earth, to be agents of healing, helping to heal the wounds that are dividing us. We can do that with intentional plans and programs like panel discussions or maybe a concert. But it also means being poised, being ready when the moment arises to be an agent of healing, whether we're at the airport or the store, or at work or at school. I just read recently about a story about flight attendants who are voluntarily going to workshops so that they can spot a potential victim of human trafficking if that person's on their flight and how to respond to that. That's being poised to be salt of the earth and agents of healing. We might not always have the right words, but if we have the right heart, being salt of the earth. And then Jesus looked at his disciples and said, "You are the light of the world. And whatever you do, don't you dare try hiding your light. Shine your light brightly." That's part of who this church is. A church that likes to shine its light brightly. We have a really tall steeple up there with the range light in it that can guide ships to safety, especially in this day and age. If all other technology fails, those lights can still guide ships into safety. As a church, we have remained committed to being a place of safety and of welcome with our words and with our actions and with our banners out front, being a place of welcome and safety for all. So even these past few weeks, when I have struggled to find just the right words today to say, I have been able to stand under and with your shining light of welcome. And so that's the second picture on the bottom of your order of worship. There is the front of our church with our words of welcome. And I want to tell you two stories that have happened as a result of the banner and the flag over the last couple of weeks. The first one, I was coming back from lunch, and a man approached me out in the narthex in the lobby, and he asked me if the banner was true. Did we really welcome refugees and immigrants here? And I have to admit, I had a moment of panic, because I thought, what if he's asking me for sanctuary now, and we're not ready for this yet, and what am I going to do? And so we sat down on the couch and talked together. He and his wife are recent immigrants to the United States. They both have jobs. They have a son who's in elementary school, and yet they're trying to plan for the summer because they know childcare is so expensive. And so they didn't want to have one of them stop working. So he was talking with me about if I knew of inexpensive childcare options for an elementary school age child in the summer. And I was able to offer him some advice and some direction on that. But then just a couple of days later, I was standing again in the narthex, and I was talking actually to a couple of River House board members, when this woman came running into the church with tears literally in her eyes. And she looked at me and she said, "Do you work here?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I was a school teacher my entire career, and I had so many refugees and immigrants in my classrooms. Thank you for your banner. Thank you for welcoming them." And she pumped her fists and she ran out. And yeah. Our website, our flag, our banner, they are bright lights shining out into the world saying, this is a place where we want you to feel safe. This is a place of welcome. So maybe you're like me, maybe you're not, but sometimes I've been struggling to find the right words to say to address all that's going on in our world right now. And I know we cannot be silent. We have to find our voice. But as we're organizing those thoughts, we can be salt of the earth, healing the world's wounds. We can be the light of the world, offering welcome and safety to those who need it. And then we can trust that God will give us the words to proclaim and the actions to take when we need to the most. The question is, are we willing to do it? Amen.